Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream live on Al Jazeera and YouTube. Today, a stream update. Issues brought to us by you, our community.
As the Bonn climate talks start, we're meeting journalists who went on an extraordinary voyage to Antarctica to investigate climate change. And then Al Jazeera's Kimberly Halkett tells us what to watch out for as US President Donald Trump tours Asia.
But first, why are more than 600 refugees refusing to leave a prison in Papua New Guinea? Take a look at this video from Al Jazeera's online team.
Refugees, Salim Sikar here, and left him and gone to Australia. Who are responsible here? Australia brought us here.
Guards, all the staff, they left the detention center. So the gate was open and none of them was here to provide a safety for us.
Joining us with the latest details on this developing story from Sydney, Al Jazeera correspondent Andrew Thomas. Andrew, you've been reporting on this story for years. Now, the Australian government's idea was, how do we stop people from dying at sea who are arriving on boats? They're not being processed officially. It's all very unofficial, and there's a death toll as well. Going up to where we are now, 2017, this started around about 2013, would you say this has been a successful policy by the Australian government? Are they happy with how things are turning out right now?
Well, they're obviously not happy about the current situation on Manus Island, but I think they would say that their policy's been a huge success. You've got to take this all back to where it began, 2008, 2009, 2010, going forward to 2013. In a way that hadn't happened to Australia before, boats of asylum seekers were arriving on a very regular basis, 2, sometimes 3 boats a day. Now, the numbers might not seem huge by international standards, but Australia has a relatively small population, and when you've got 50,000 people arriving unofficially, as the government here would say, by boats, and many of those boats indeed not getting through as well, and as you say, more than 1,000 people drowned when their boat sunk on the way to Australia. Something had to be done. There's a politics of this, of course, as well. There was an election in 2013. So the government came up with this tough policy which said that anybody arriving by boat to Australia would never get to stay in Australia. And more than that, they would be instantly deported. As soon as they arrived on Australian soil, they'd be put on planes and sent to either Papua New Guinea or to Nauru, where they would be processed to decide if they were genuine refugees or not. And if they were, then they would get asylum, but not in Australia, in either Papua New Guinea or Nauru or another country that Australia deemed fit to send them to, but they would never come to Australia. And that has been the consistent message all the way through from the Australian government, that they would never get to come to Australia. And in the sense that that worked as a deterrent, it's been spectacularly successful. Boats are not coming to Australia. The government said yesterday there hasn't been a successful boat landing in Australia, as they call them, for more than 1,000 days. So the policy has worked, but the legacy is these men on Manus Island and these families on Nauru. That is perhaps what has been a whole lot less successful, certainly from a PR perspective, which of course is what we're talking about in a sense, and real life.
And Andrew, one of the top news lines right now is that there are men who are refusing to leave this camp. They're being forced to be relocated out of this camp, and they're refusing to leave. This is one of the people who are on Manus Island, one of the refugees. His name is Izzatullah Kakar, and this is what he wrote not too long ago. I left my family and friends and was seeking safety, but I couldn't find safety. It's better if my boat was sunk and I was dead. Hashtag Manus. Now, he got a lot of replies from people saying that, you know, we don't want you dead. We're glad that you are in a more safe place than on a boat that could be sinking. But of course, his conditions, according to what he's saying, are pretty dire. Why is it that people are refusing to leave that camp?
Well, there are lots of complicated reasons. Again, I'll just quickly give you a little history lesson on Manus Island. I've been there. I know the place. I know what it's like. We call it a camp, but really it was a prison in the traditional sense. It had barbed wire, high fences, guards, the lot, and there were about 1,000 men in there. And during their time in this prison, they were assessed to be refugees or not. Well, the Papua New Guinean courts decided more than a year ago now that it wasn't legal under Papua New Guinean law to imprison people in this way. So they ordered this prison closed, and Australia said, because Australia ran it, all right, we'll comply with that. But they had a kind of a long lead-in time, and they've always been saying that the 31st of was the day when they were going to close that prison. And that's what they've stuck to. Now, they say, and you're seeing it right now, this alternative accommodation elsewhere on Manus Island is where people can move to. But there are 3 reasons people won't go there. First of all, they say, and again, you're seeing some of it now, that accommodation isn't ready. You can see it's only half built. Well, some is ready and some isn't ready. I think the truth is there is enough of it ready for at least the majority of those people to move out of the prison. But there are other reasons they don't want to go. Second reason they don't want to go is they don't feel welcome by the local community. There's a lot of hostility towards the refugees of Manus Island. It's a place with a fairly tight community that hasn't really welcomed outsiders. Papua New Guinea is a tribal society, a very difficult one to integrate into. And also, let's be honest, the refugees haven't made themselves very welcome. They have been loudly complaining about what an awful place Papua New Guinea is for a long time. And as a result of that, they have not exactly endeared themselves to the locals. But let's again be honest, the locals have been incredibly hostile to them. There was a time in 2014 when locals broke into the prison. They beat up many refugees. One guy was bashed to death with a rock. I mean, it doesn't get more brutal than that. And the refugees have been on fairly regular day release over the last year and a half or so. And there have been many, many, many incidents where those refugees, while out in the community, have been beaten up, have been robbed. They tend to have mobile phones to talk to their families back wherever they've come. They've had those stolen. Many have been stabbed. The conditions are dangerous. But I do think we need to also talk about the third reason, and that is the principle of the thing. I talked to a refugee on Manus Island this week, and I said to him, let's be honest, it's partly about the accommodation, it's partly about fears, but is there a bit of principle here? Are you being a bit stubborn? You don't want to get pushed around by Papua New Guinea and Australia? And he said, absolutely, this is principle. We have had 4 years of our lives in limbo, not knowing what's going to happen to us, having to do what the Australians say, living in these horrific conditions. And Manus Island is not a pleasant place, I promise you. We don't want to be pushed around again. This is our chance to take a stand. This is our chance to get our message onto the international political agenda and the international media agenda. If we just passively go to this alternative accommodation quietly, no one will ever remember we're here, and we could be stuck here for 14 years, for 40 years. These 4 years will seem like just the beginning. So you've got to, in a sense, got to respect that principle argument, but I don't think we should ignore it. You know, it is part of it.
So we got a comment here from Carl. He says that these men have been offered homes and asylum from the New Zealand government. They've offered to take 150. That's a huge number of lives that could be saved, Carl says. Australian government has concerns that they will be able to come to Australia via New Zealand, and so they are refusing that. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I was at a press conference on Sunday here. Jacinda Ardern, the new New Zealand Prime Minister, was in Sydney for a meeting with her Australian counterpart, Malcolm Turnbull. Now, Jacinda Ardern is from a left-of-centre party in New Zealand, and they traditionally have been more challenging to Australia over this policy and more willing to sort of point out its flaws. And New Zealand has long had this offer to Australia to take some of the refugees. Australia has declined it. Now, they've declined it because New Zealanders ultimately have rights to live in Australia. And if these asylum seekers, refugees, were allowed to resettle in New Zealand, says
Right.
Australia's government, then ultimately they might come to Australia. And that would defeat this Never Australia policy.
Right.
But they've also, Australia, got this deal now with the United States to take some of the refugees. Again, you might think, well, that's a developed country. Why would that be any more of a deterrent than anything else? But again, it sticks by the principle the Australian government has of not Australia, in a sense, anywhere but Australia. They want to work through that deal with the US first, but
Right.
that is moving painfully slowly. I mean, Donald Trump hates it. So far, 50 refugees have been resettled under it in more than a year, and we're talking tiny numbers.
We will have to end this segment of the show right here, Andrew. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Thank you for joining us. Keep us posted as things develop. I know it's one that our community wants to keep following. From Manus, we're going even further south to the end of the world. Here's a peek at the award-winning interactive project done by Al Jazeera earlier this year.
It's really getting wild here. This is just the beginning of what is forecast to be a much larger storm. And for the next 12 to 24 hours, we're going to have to travel through the heart of it here in the Southern Ocean. And it gives you a sense of just how difficult it is to do science down here. Not only do you have to get down here to do the science, and that's a tough job, but you also have to then try and collect samples, either at sea or land on islands, to collect samples for your science. It's a really tough environment to work in.
You just saw Tarek Baisley, who went on a month-long voyage to Antarctica to investigate climate change. Last week, the interactive he produced with Alaa Batena was honored by the Association of International Broadcasters. Congratulations, Tarek. He's here to share stories from his trip. Tarek, I want to start here with a tweet we got from Narbuth on your journey. He says, at the current rate and speed of climate change, how long do we have before the North Pole and the South Pole icebergs completely melt down? Now, I don't know if you can give us a specific number there, but based on what you saw in your journey, what do you make of this question?
Well, I think it's a good question in the sense that many people are asking that question about melt. It's a huge white hole, if you like. It's the black hole. We simply don't know when it comes to trying to work out what's happening in the global climate, what's happening in Antarctica. There simply isn't enough data. There's not enough science being done down there to really understand. We know there's change, and we know it's happening faster than ever before, but how fast that's happening is really unclear. And why that's important is because it is such an enormous influencer of the global climate system. I mean, 90% of the world's ice is down on Antarctica. This is a continent that's larger than Australia, and it doubles every winter because it freezes up. Now, if that begins to melt, that has a huge impact on all the currents in the world's oceans, and that feeds into the food systems, to weather patterns, a huge and ongoing effect across the globe. So we don't know. We know it is melting. It'll be many millions of years, I would think, before we're completely ice-free, even if we carried on with our fossil fuel burning frenzy. But it is actually a very good question to consider, and one that the team I was with, there were 50 scientists on this particular vessel, and they were looking at melt, they were looking at temperatures of the oceans. So it was something they were really concerned about, looking at ice cores as well.
Tarek, I want everybody who's watching this to be able to see your interactive project. And if they go to interactive.aljazeera.com, look for A Voyage to Antarctica. They can click through as they're listening to you. Let me just show this. This is you leaving port. What was your mission? There was a science mission, but what was your mission for a month for Al Jazeera?
Well, really to document what was going on here. Now, it's very few science missions have quite as many scientists on board. We had people looking at air, ice. We had a submarine on board, so they could put a submarine down both to the sea floor and look at the interactions of animals down there. And in fact, they found some new interactions between starfish and fish that had never been seen before, and are pretty significant. They also put their submarine in under the lip of the glacier itself and saw some pretty remarkable melting there. We had a couple of helicopters on board, Zodiacs. So as we went around, and this was a journey of a month, where we covered thousands and thousands of kilometres all the way down the western side of Antarctica, across the Ross Sea, and then up the side of the peninsula to Chile. Samples were being taken. That never happens. Normally people go to one place, they do one experiment, they come back, or one or two experiments. So my job was to try and understand what these scientists were doing, a team from all around the world, and document it. And I was filing both for Al Jazeera News, but also this interactive we put together. There was an Earthrise special that ran on Al Jazeera English a little earlier this year, where we put all this together and considered some of the bigger implications of it. So my role really was there I was my own cameraman, reporter, trying to understand what was going on there.
How did that go down, Tarek?
Oh, look, it was a fantastic opportunity, not only to go to a place in the world that, frankly, nobody goes to. Some of these sites we went to, we visited one of the volcanoes right on the edge, Mount Saipal, absolutely extraordinary volcano, and on the side of that was a Delhi penguin colony. So we went to some absolutely remarkable places, but I also had the world's best guides. These were PhD post-grad scientists who were deeply immersed in their particular aspect of science, and I could sit on their shoulder and say, why are you drilling here? What are you taking there? What's that piece of lichen on the rock? What's this bird I can see on the bow? Absolutely incredible guides. And then, the photography that I did and the videography I did down there gave me a massive appreciation for the producers of things like Blue Ocean, the kind of wildlife video and cameramen. I mean, just extraordinary, particularly in what can be pretty harsh conditions.
And of course, your photography was good because you shot penguins. And so online, when we tweeted that out, a little picture of what that looks like got pretty big response. And it prompted things like this tweet from Simple, who says, what are various solutions as to how humans can help preserve Antarctica, reduce the effects of enhanced climate change on it?
Well, I mean, it's that big thing, isn't it? We need to cut our greenhouse gas emissions. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. That we know, if we do it fast enough, will stop the planet's warming cycle that we're in at the moment. It's as simple as that. And I every year, and I've reported on climate change for many years now, every year we have the COP, the UN climate talk starting. They began this week in Bonn just a few hours ago. But we talk about climate emissions reductions. Actually, year on year, we produce more and more and more emissions. We haven't actually faced up to the issue, which is a lot of our creature comforts need to go if we're going to preserve the equilibrium on the planet at the moment. And as much as we talk about it, actually the actions in many, many countries, many people don't match those good intentions.
Tariq, I just want to show our viewers a little clip that you did, and it's a 360 view, which is part of the fun of interactive, that you get to see so much more, plus penguins. Have a look.
Well, if you're seeing me, you're looking on the wrong side of this 360-degree video, because around the other side is a baby albatross chick, one of tens of thousands living on this island. It's a sub-Antarctic island just off the bottom of Chile, very near to Cape Horn. We've been granted special access to come here and see some of the birds that are on this island. I'm with a group of scientists that are travelling around Antarctica to do a number of surveys of different species, one of them being bird life like this beautiful, fluffy albatross chick.
So Tariq, we don't just love this on the stream. It is now an award-winning project. When you heard about that, what was your thought? What were you thinking? I know it wasn't just you, but a little team. But what were you thinking? Why do you think it was recognised?
I think in some ways it was the privileged access we got. I mean, really, I just saw that clip now, and I've been busy on other projects since then, but it brings back a wealth of memories and just thoughts I had about being able to go to such a unique place. And I accept that I had an amazing opportunity to go and do that. In some ways, down there, you almost point a camera in any direction. And the 360-degree stuff we did, I'd never done before, so it was like pretty experimental from my point of view.
Sure.
But you're just in such an extraordinary location that pretty much what you see outside your window and what you see in front of you all the time is remarkable. And that's why that journey was amazing. I mean, we had very, very long days. I hardly slept for a month because there was just too much going on outside the window. There was these incredible long sunsets that would last for 6 hours, and then it would get light again. The day would start. Every day we seemed to be in a different remarkable location, and the choppers were flying out that way, or Zodiac's the other. So I think perhaps in the interactive, what caught the judge's attention was really just this remarkable access, but also I tried to bring a lot of the scientific data and details that we know about what's going on into that, so it works as an experience for the viewer.
All right, remarkable, extraordinary, two words you've been using a lot in this segment, but definitely deserve to do so. Tariq, thank you for sharing your stories from Antarctica. Take care.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Now from Antarctica, we go to Asia, where US President Donald Trump is on the longest trip by an American president for more than 25 years.
During his 2 days in Japan, there's no question that President Trump and Prime Minister Abe have grown close as friends. Trump calling the relationship extraordinary, Abe calling Trump a precious friend. And they have also strengthened the alliance between the two nations to a level not seen before. But it's not just because they like each other. After a summit meeting on Monday, they both underlined why they think that alliance is critical, standing together against North Korean aggression. The two agreed more pressure needs to be applied to North Korea, saying that should come from Russia and China. Prime Minister Abe announced tougher unilateral sanctions against North Korea. Assets of 35 people and groups will be frozen.
With us on set, we have Kimberly Halkett. She's just joined us. She's Al Jazeera's White House correspondent. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you.
I am just looking here. Trump will spend 9 days visiting Southeast Asia, started in Hawaii, ending up in the Philippines. How's it going so far?
So far, so good. It is a grueling schedule. I think one of the first 2 days I counted, the president was technically up working for 21 hours the first day, 19 the second day. I haven't kept count for the last little bit, but it's been a grueling schedule. And the president so far has been on his best behaviors. We like to say at the White House, he's kind of stuck to the script. The question is that we've only got one country sort of under the belt so far, and there's still 4 more to come. So the question is whether the president will be able to continue his momentum. There are a couple of things that he's checked off that people are really happy about in terms of Donald Trump's not known for being the best diplomat. So the fact that he, for instance, met with the families of abductees to North Korea, and that's certainly something that's very important for foreign leaders. We've had Barack Obama do it, George W. Bush do it, now Donald Trump do it. That was very important in terms of formality. We've also had some interesting moments in terms of some of the warmth of the relationship between the Japanese leader and Donald Trump. For example, they, at a golf course, some people are calling this golf diplomacy. They were signing hats, and the phrasing on the front of the hat was, I think, good intentioned. It was supposed to be kind of like
the little clip for this. We'll show you the clip as you're talking.
Okay, sure. Many people remember Donald Trump often wears this red hat, Make America Great Again. It's a hashtag even, MAGA. So I think that there was sort of a thought in Japan, perhaps, that it would be nice to have a similar hat and build off of this. But the phrasing was a little bit awkward. It was Donald, Shinzo, make alliance even greater. It came off as a little bit forced, and it was a little bit funny. But, you know, as far as visits go, if that's your biggest problem, you're doing okay.
So here's what a couple of people in Japan are letting us know about the trip. This is Aoki, who says, a lot of people in Japan think that Trump is just a racist. And I didn't like the fact that he came into Japan through the U.S. airbase in Tokyo. Another person writes us in about what you called the golf diplomacy. He says he's coming to Japan to play golf and eat beefsteak with Prime Minister Abe, isn't he? And this is what President Trump tweeted. A picture of him, a little video, Twitter video of him playing golf with the Prime Minister and a prolific golfer, a Japanese professional golfer.
Although they didn't keep score, apparently.
Probably a good thing with the pro right there. But what's underlying all of that?
This has been framed by the White House as really, for the whole visit, in really 2 parts. One is security, because hanging and looming over all of this is the dark cloud that concerns all of these Asian countries, and that is aggression by North Korea. That is a concern, that is a fear. So certainly that is one of the key things that is sort of the underpinning of all discussions. The other is really kind of an economic front. This has more to do with the United States in many ways. We heard this on the campaign trail. Donald Trump repeatedly said there's a trade deficit when it comes to a number of nations, of Japan, China. These are going to be some of the uncomfortable moments that will be coming ahead.
One thing we should look forward to, Kimberly.
Something to look forward to. Definitely, this is going to be on Wednesday, the speech by the president at the National Assembly in Seoul. And certainly that is going to be watched carefully to see not only what the president says, because if we look at that United Nations speech where he called Kim Jong-un little rocket man, people are a little nervous. What is he going to say?
Right.
And how is it going to be received? Because we know that the audience that's going to be watching that isn't just these Asian countries surrounding, but also North Korean leader Kim Jong-un.
All right. Thank you so much, Kimberly Halkett, for keeping us up to date with what President Trump is doing as he tours around Asia. Still some more days to come, so we will check back in with you on our Al Jazeera coverage. So before we go, I want to tell you about a very special show that we have coming up tomorrow. The Dalai Lama will be a guest on the stream, and we'll also be joined by youth leaders from conflict zones for a discussion on peace building. So if you are interested in that conversation, how could you not be? A good place to put your questions and your queries and your comments straight to Malika Bilal, #AJStream, and we'll hopefully be able to pull them into our discussion on Tuesday. Until then, we'll see you online. Take care, everybody.